All right, so today we want to do a little review from Algebra 1 for factoring. We need to remember how to factor. So just a couple of quick things to remember. Always look for a GCF, a greatest common factor. If we have a common factor, all the terms can be divided by the same thing. We should always bring out a common factor. For example, we could have something like 8x squared plus 16x minus 4. If we do, I look at that and I'm like, wait a minute. All of these numbers can be divided by 4. 4 would be the greatest common factor. I could factor out that greatest common factor. Remember, when we factor out, we are just dividing everything by 4 and bringing it up to the front. So bring the 4 up to the front. That's going to leave me with 2x squared plus 4x minus 1. That doesn't disappear completely. 4 divided by 4 is 1. That 1 needs to stay there. That would factor out my GCF of 1. Sometimes the GCF can be a variable. Okay, if I have 2x squared minus 3x. Okay, 2 and 3 don't have anything in common, but both terms do have an x. So I could factor out an x, which means I'm going to divide it out and move it up to the front. So got an x up front. That's going to leave me with 2x minus 3. So that would be factoring out a greatest common factor. You should always look for a common factor first. Always. Other ways to factor that you want to remember. We did have special cases, so we want to make sure we remember our special cases. We do have a perfect square minus a perfect square. And when I have a perfect square minus a perfect square, it always factors to be two binomials. And I take the square roots. Square root of x squared is x. Square root of y squared is y. And we call this the sum and difference because one is a plus and one is a minus. And it will always factor that way. So examples, I could have something like 4x squared minus 25. Okay, that's a perfect square, and that's a perfect square. Again, this is why I wanted you guys to memorize your list of perfect squares. We have to be able to recognize them on sight. Square root of 4x squared is 2x. Square root of 25 is 5. We make one a plus and one a minus. So that's factoring when we have a perfect square minus a perfect square. If it is plus, doesn't work. It only works if it is a minus. So please make sure you're aware of that. Other ones that we need to make sure we can factor is trinomials of quadratic form specifically. So things that we want to remember. If we have x squared plus bx plus c, meaning that the number in front of x squared is just 1. A is equal to 1 is another way to think about that. A is equal to 1. These all factor fairly quickly. They should be fairly simple. It's always going to be x plus or minus something and x plus or minus something. We just need to know what the two numbers are that go here. And we're always looking for two numbers that multiply to give us b, multiply to get b, and add the same two numbers that add to get c. That's what we're looking for, and that's how we would factor these. So for example, if I've got x squared plus 6x plus 8, and I want to factor this, I'm like, well, a is 1. I know it's going to factor to be x plus something and x plus something. So what are two numbers that multiply to give me 8, but add to give me 6? So I look and I'm like, well, 1 times 8, 2 times 4. Oh, wait a minute. 2 plus 4 would equal 6. So it's x plus 2 and x plus 4. If I've got x squared minus 3x.
Could I have a custodian to the office, please? Custodian to the office. Thank you.
Minus 28. And I want to factor this. I'm like, well, okay, hold on. A is 1, so I know it's going to be x and x. But I need two numbers that multiply to give me negative 28. If it's negative, one's got to be positive and one's got to be negative. If the middle number's negative, that means when they added, it turned out negative. So
Can Sade Foy come to the front office? Can Sade Foy please come to the front office?
So that means that the biggest one must be negative. So I think of pairs for 28. I got negative 28 and 1, negative 14 and 2, negative 7 and 4. Oh, wait a minute. Negative 7 plus 4 would equal negative 3. So it must be x minus 7 and x plus 4. And that's what it would factor to be. So two numbers that multiply to give me C, add to give me B. The other type of trinomial that we want to look for is if A is not 1, ax squared plus bx plus c.
Samson Myers, please call 4,000. Samson Myers, please call 4,000.
All right, so what that means I want to do here is that before I start trying to pick two numbers, I'm going to have to multiply A times C. That's the first thing I want to do. Once I've multiplied A times C, then I'm going to look for two numbers that multiply to equal this, multiply to equal AC, and add to equal B. All right? And then after that, I'm actually going to have to use a backward box to help me get factored. So let's take a look at these. An example. 2x squared plus 5 plus 7x. There we go. 2x squared plus 7x plus 5. The first thing I would have to do is multiply A times C. So 2 times 5 is 10. Now I want to find two numbers that multiply to equal 10 and add to equal 7. Well, that's pretty easy. 5 times 2 multiply to equal 10 and add to equal 7. But this is where we are different than the other one. I can't skip straight to the answer. I do actually have to figure out what was the thing that actually got multiplied. If you've ever used the box method, remember you would put your binomial here and your binomial here and multiply everything together. This is working backwards. I started with 2x squared and I had plus 5 as my last box. But these two somehow ended up being 7x. Well, that's what these two numbers are. This has figured out what those two numbers were. So I'm going to put in these boxes instead of 7x, put 5x and 2x. Because now all I have to do is find common factors. Common factors I'm much better at. So the common factor for this row is 2 and x. Common factor for this row is 5. Common factor for this row is just x, and the common factor for this row is just 1. The only thing that will divide both of those is just 1. So that means it factored to be 2x plus 5 and x plus 1.